Hi, this is Shui with a review of a Korean movie titled The Battle Road to Victory, Korean title 봉오동 전투. It's a very sensitive movie to review because many Korean viewers have been uh, receiving a lot of flack for giving their honest, critical opinion about this movie. Uh, Not many people are very offering a lot of praise for this movie, naturally. This is what many Korean viewers and Korean film critics call 국뽕 영화, as in it relies heavily on a sense of patriotism among Koreans. That if you don't like this movie, you're a traitor, so you better pretend like you like this movie. Or they're just playing to the basic patriotism and emotions that you have for this country and feeds on it. So naturally, it means they have a safety mechanism, and even if it's not a very good movie, they can say, hey, we try to do the best we can to portray Korea or Korean history or Korea's rebellion against Japanese colonizers or uh, during the war between North and South Korea. This one is directed by Won Shin-yeon. Let me double check that. Won Shin-yeon. Yeah, Won Shin-yeon is the director. He's known for his previous work called 구타 유발자, which is one of my personal favorites. So uh, it explains why there are a lot of gory, detailed, explicit violence in the movie, very bloody, unnecessary killings and butcherings and whatnot. Um, but I prefer his old movie to this one. At least that one had, despite the shock, it had a very strong message at the end, and I loved it. It was about bullying and how it transcends age. Uh, if you do not understand a lot about Korean history and culture, the relationship between Korea and Japan, uh, I won't say it's pound for pound comparable to the Jews and Nazis during uh, during those horrific periods, but yeah, something like that. I can't say it's just as bad or worse, but it's the kind of emotion that we have between the two countries. Uh, of course, we've moved beyond that, but still, there is this sentiment. There is an anti-Korean sentiment in Japan. I'm not saying I can't say how much of the populace feels this way. I can't say the same about Korea either, but there is a sentiment, an anti-Japanese, anti-Korean sentiment. At the same time, the two countries are very similar and dissimilar in some ways. We have a very strong relationship. We are very much similar and dependent on one another. We have a lot to learn from each other because of our cultural differences. But at the same time, currently there is a conflict between South Korea and Japan. Trade dispute, historical dispute. You can blame the government. Don't blame the people. They do not represent the overall sentiment of the whole people and everyone in this country or in that country. But that's the situation now, and this movie opened. It's about Korean independence fighters, a military combined force of military and independence fighters rising up against the Japanese military, which is of course more stronger and organized, and they've colonized Korea. Uh, any movie about rebellion can be great. Uh, this one had a lot of good qualities to it as well. I especially like how the main actor in the movie, Yoo Hye-jin, jokingly talk about it's the opposite. It's the reversal of the movie 300, where the Spartans joke about what do you do during the day? I'm a cobbler. I'm a barber, and you train and become soldiers because you need to. And the Spartans laugh at them. Spartans, what are your jobs? Soldiers, who are you? Soldiers, and they're very proud of that. But it's the reversal of that. These average Joes, the Koreans who are sticking up for their country's freedom, the character is saying, it doesn't matter if you're a farmer or a butcher or a writer, Pick up a gun and you fight for your country. You're an independence fighter. You are a soldier. Anyone can be a soldier, a hero. That's it's a very interesting and moving speech. But they repeat that a couple of times and ruin it. That's what you do that's what you shouldn't do in movies. So that's one of my biggest beef with the movie. Going back to Japan and the historical issues, there have been Japanese administration, governments in the past, prime ministers who acknowledge historical wrongdoings that Japan has not acknowledged, and they apologized and they try to overcome that hump. But then there are changes in administration. This current Shinzo Abe administration is rigidly, firmly trying to regain what he thinks is Japan laws, to amend its pacifist constitution, to have a military, to go back to what he believes is the glory days of Japan. And so in order to do that, they cannot acknowledge the horrific historic crimes they've committed against other countries, especially South Korea, whether it's forced sexual slavery of women or forced menial labor without pay for some people. So that's where they're stuck at. And it speaks volumes about their insecurity, the inability to face facts and truth. It just speaks volumes about insecurity. And Japan's history of colonizing other countries in the most brutal fashion, leaving nothing behind, erasing every ounce of historical, cultural relics or facts or any shreds of evidence that country ever existed, that seemed to be the Japanese way. A lot of facts show that, unfortunately. But of course, I'm sure there were good people in Japan. I'm sure there were people who were against such moves. Just as these days, even though the Japanese government is making all these questionable decisions to turn its back against South Korea or Korea in general, there are movements in Japan, whether it's artists who are standing up against the government who decided to do something against an exhibit that features Japan's wartime sins. So yeah, that's the way. So that's the way I wish this movie could have been. It's great. We already know that Japan has wartime sins, that they are the villains during the war. They have no need to explain that. Some people complain that some of the decapitation and how the Japanese soldiers celebrated, it's ridiculous, but there are records of them doing such deeds and taking photos of themselves doing such actions and having a sense of enjoyment and pride in that. So it's there. But my problem is the main villains should have been given a little bit more character. They should have been a little bit less one-dimensional. It just feels like this guy was programmed like a Terminator to hate other countries, look down on Korea and kill Koreans. And, whatever Japan does is correct. So if they had a bit of a backstory to him, or reflect some other side to him through other characters, that would have been good. They had a young soldier who is shocked by what the military is doing out here, and he tries to stand up against his own Japanese military. So that's good, but it's not enough. I wish they could have done something with the most impactful, the charismatic main villain of this movie. There were 3 prominent Japanese actors who played, one of them was a kid, so he doesn't really count, but 2 of them played very evil, sinister military leaders. So it's very puzzling how these 2 actors, who are very established and recognized and respected in their country, decided to embark on this project. And maybe it was their input. Maybe they wanted to portray them as evil and vicious as possible because they felt that it was necessary, because they were playing the role and they wanted to send the message to their own countrymen. Who knows? But in the end, I believe it's a director. He wanted to do this. Perhaps he wanted to play it safe because that's what the Korean people might want to see. Another unnecessary addition was this very clownish Power Ranger extra type of guy who goes like, yeah, just clowning around like, oh damn Koreans, I'm gonna get them. It's just so ridiculously annoying. The actor who played that clownish character is such a good actor, so it was a wasted opportunity as well. Um, for the Korean independence fighters as well, there's too much dwelling. There's too much dwelling. We get that. Let's move on. There's just too much violin playing and slow motions and whatnot. And yeah, that's the kind of balance I wish they could have had. Uh, they make them seem like superheroes. They go around wielding a sword, charging head on, and slashing down like 17 Japanese soldiers with guns. So they have the stormtrooper aim. The Japanese soldiers can't get anyone. One of the lead actors, Ryu Jun-yo, who I think is a great actor. I loved his character, but unfortunately they didn't flesh him out enough, and he was just one-dimensional, and he was completely invincible. He charges and doesn't get shot. He dodges bullets, and there's a grenade explosion. I think there's 3 times, and he's still alive. So don't have the grenade explosions, or have that happen somewhere in a distance where you would have any reason for him to be alive. So that's what I would have liked. If you want to go for realism, go for realism. Focus on the details, the weapons, strategy, the angles, and every shot means life or death. One shot could kill you. They could have that in their heads, that fear, that purpose. If you want to make it like somewhat of a more fun action sequences oriented, then yeah, by all means, do that. Do that, and don't suddenly come back to being serious and talk about strategies and whatnot. And even when you're explaining about the strategies, it seemed like it needed a little bit more explanation, not just words, but descriptions, reenactments, and whatnot. They just show little models made of sand and little pawns being pushed forward and whatnot. So yeah, that's unfortunate. And there was a female character they kept giving close-ups to, and there's no explanation as to where she suddenly came out of. She wasn't even carrying a rifle, and then suddenly she picks up a gun and she's great at it. There's nothing, but they keep giving close-ups of her because, I don't know, to cater to the female audience that, hey, there were women in the independence movement too. If there were, please flash them out. It's also unfortunate that a lot of there's not enough support from viewers, as in support for other neutral or critical opinions about this movie. There's been a lot of progress compared to the past. This movie itself, it's not as I keep complaining about some of the characters are too one-dimensional. It's fleshed out a lot more than some of the previous movies that are what you would call Gukbong movies, but it's a step forward. We need to take a few steps more forward. And yeah, for film opinions and criticisms, let's have it out in the open and let's just accept it as how it is. It's a small but very big reflection of society as a whole, that people aren't receptive to other ideas, or they just shut their ears when they feel like someone's emitting negative energy or expressing ideas that do not coincide with theirs. So yeah. So this movie brings out a lot of it provokes a lot of thoughts. The director, I feel that he was very mindful, or maybe it's because of the production company. They are banking on this a lot. They have a lot of I believe they're in a bit of a financial situation. That's what I've heard from other reports. So they want to make sure this succeeds. It opens somewhere in a week that coincides with South Korea's, Korea's Liberation Day from Japan's colonial rule. So yeah, the timing of it all, I wish it could have been a little bit different.